Faris, welcome to the podcast. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much, Simon. It's a real pleasure to be with you, the listeners, the viewers today. I'm sure we're going to have an excellent conversation.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this conversation today. And also, two words that I've never seen put together is strategy and emotional intelligence. So maybe where we could start is by bringing those two together.
Yeah, sure. I wasn't sure which two words you were going to say, like, jam and coffee or something. But yeah, strategy and emotional intelligence. The reason you say, the reason you reference them is that is my title on a lot of social media, because that is a nice description of what I do. I am a reformed strategy consultant who tries to bring more emotional intelligence into the room. I realized long ago that just thinking about a strategy from an IQ, from an intellectual point of view, is not enough. And actually, it turned out I was really good at the emotional intelligence. How does somebody feel when they read that strategy? How does what emotions are they going through as you're describing it to them, as they're imagining what it's going to involve them having to do? And that's such a key component to writing any strategy. So I think they go hand in hand, and they should be more explicitly talked about, because one without the other is going to lead to no success. Whatever you want to achieve.
So digging into that, you said one without the other. You've seen, so maybe you've got strategy, but it's only later you've been able to add the emotional intelligence piece. So what have you seen that didn't work in business strategy that started to fail?
Yeah, well, so as I said, I was a strategy consultant for 12 years. I wrote a lot of strategies for companies around the world. Got paid a lot. Not I got paid. They paid a lot for it, right? In some cases, millions of pounds, dollars for a strategy. And what I became fascinated with, because it was so much blood, sweat and tears on my part, I actually ended up circling back to those companies years later and going, did you actually do the strategy we wrote for you? Which, in our eyes was immaculate. And just conversation after conversation, it'd be like, no, we gave it a go. We didn't even try. We did bits of it. And I'd be fascinated and be like, what? Why? You paid us a lot. B, it was, from our eyes, the perfect strategy. So what went wrong? And I'd sit and listen to all these tales of, well, we gave it a go, but there was politics, or, well, we gave it a go, but it was too much effort, or we didn't even give it a go because two people in the room disagreed with each other and we couldn't get past the conflict that was in the room. Or we wanted to give it a go, but we had too much on and we were distracted by other things. So all these things, human emotional responses to a strategy of different dimensions, kept coming up time and time again. And a lot of them, I was like, well, we should have factored for that. We should have brought that up in the conversation when we presented it to you and when we were working on it with you, and it became more and more evident that you needed to be tackling these things alongside. And I guess one of the biggest things I saw that I advise lots of companies nowadays is, if you build a strategy in isolation, Simon, and then hand it to a group of people, they will resist it. Largely because it's not their idea, right? Human beings like their own idea. They like the feeling of ownership. So even if it's presented by super smart, super friendly people, it's still not theirs. So their natural reaction is to push back. Or say, look at that. The capital A should be a small a. Or, they start finding flaws and therefore immediately they're beginning to disown it and chip away at it. And therefore immediately making it less likely they're going to do anything with it.
So interesting, isn't it? It comes down to a lot of human psychology.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing in life doesn't involve human psychology if you're not factoring it in. Or maybe this is an insight into my world. I factor it into everything. I think about, what's going to be the psychological impact of anything? This tube of toothpaste I'm about to buy, this meal I'm about to cook for people. That's just how my brain is wired.
So when we're thinking about emotional intelligence, I recently did a podcast on emotional intelligence with a coach. Okay. And really it was something that just goes so deep and so wide across nearly everything that we do in business. It's almost, we were trying to have a debate on where it starts and where it ends and where it begins. And it's just fully ingrained in some respects. Like, where do you, what's your perspective on emotional intelligence?
I mean, it depends how you define it. But if it's about emotions, and of course, we are not robots. Even with the advent of AI, there are emotions in every workplace. And emotional intelligence, if you look at the classic descriptions, the Goldmans, the Bradburys, is about an ability to be aware of both yours and other people's emotions and be able to, react to them and control them and sort of sense them and manage them. So, with that definition, it permeates into everything. Okay. And it's why I always laugh when people say, well, you should separate your work self from your non-work self. I'm like, it doesn't work like that. You can't check your emotions when you log on or when you go into the office. If you're having a bad day, you're having a bad day, right? You should be aware of that. And it's something I confronted very early on in starting my own business. I say to a lot of people, building a business is really about dealing with your own emotions and getting comfortable with yourself.
Fascinating. And then when we're thinking about strategy and weaving in the emotional intelligence, and someone is reading through that strategy, bearing in mind the context which we just said, which was, unless someone believes it's their own idea, they're more likely to challenge it, because in some respects that strategy is telling someone what to do, and everyone hates that. So you're always going to get, if you're presenting it to a board of maybe 12, someone's going to object, a bunch of people will object, and therefore getting it accepted or considered is a real challenge. So how are you peppering in emotional intelligence into that situation?
So there's several things, right? I always say you should never do a grand reveal in an important meeting, right? There shouldn't be this one big da-da, right, for dramatic effect. If you do that, you are more than likely to fail, right? What it should be is a series of micro involvements from the people. And it could be in that meeting. I often talk to leaders and say, I tell them the story of the iStore. Is it called the iStore? The Apple iStore in the early days. I don't know if you heard this. So when Apple first opened their stores, they had this technique where they would put the iPads on the wall and they would make all the iPads, they'd go around at the start of the day and they would just twist each iPad sort of 3 or 4 degrees askew. Okay? Now, the reason being, when somebody walks in, what do you think the first thing they're going to do when they start looking at the iPads?
They're going to want to correct it.
They're going to want to correct it because your brain's like, there's something not right there. And the thing they discovered, as soon as somebody touches, apologies, there's some drilling in my apartment, it seems. As soon as somebody touched one of those iPads, they were 4 times as likely to buy it because it became a sense of ownership. I touched it, I felt it. Oh, I'm going to start playing with it. Now, the reason I tell that story is I tell every leader, leave your strategy 4 or 5 degrees askew, right? Unfinished. Hand it to a bunch of people, let them touch it, let them play with it, let them feel, let them add in and rewrite it. Yeah? And then they'll feel ownership, right? So you don't have to get everyone in your company into a room with a blank piece of paper, but you need to find some way to get them involved and feel like they have ownership and let them touch and play and, get involved.
Yeah. So interesting, isn't it? Thinking about the psychological impact of a person and them needing to have a level of ownership of something before they can buy into it. In my world in sales, it's actually very similar to that. So let's just say we're preparing for a major presentation. This is not easy to do. And it's, I'm talking about a utopia situation. But let's just say we're going in, there's going to be 6 or 7 stakeholders there, which we're presenting to. Ideally, what you've done is you've had a meeting with all of those stakeholders before, found out what's important to them. There might be 1 or 2 things on their list. This is important to me about this project, or that's important to me. If you get access to those people before, invariably you have a higher chance of 1, getting the solution right, and 2, them buying in the meeting, because you can go, oh, hi, John, how you doing? It's great talking to you before. Yeah, we're definitely going to be covering off this piece today. In the times where you don't get access to those stakeholders, invariably you haven't impacted the engagement process enough. And it's so easy for you just to completely miss the mark. 1, because you're getting some guidance of what's important to them, but also it's getting the buy-in from the people that are going to be in the room in that meeting. Because I often think when you go into a presentation like that, they've probably got 1, 2, or just 3 simple things that's really important to them. Unless you can check them off, they're going to leave that meeting going, oh, I wasn't heard. And therefore I'm kind of neutral to that vendor. it's interesting because it's almost very similar to kind of the sort of things that you're discussing.
Oh yeah, 100%. I talk a lot about the pre-meeting, the pre-wire, the pre-meeting before a board session. I will meet with every member of that board, take them through a personalized pack, because just like you say, get consultation, get an insight, let them feel involved. And the other thing is, if there is a severe reaction, do you know what? It's very hard to have the same level of emotion twice, right? If you've erupted once, it's very hard to erupt a second time a day later, right? So do it in private. Find out if test the water, find out if it's a really terrible idea, they're going to get really angry. Not only can you change it, but likely, even if you were to present exactly the same thing to them the next day, they'd be a bit calmer, right?
I always like to think of it as get the no now, which is if you do a private meeting, they will tell you the no within that first few minutes, and then you can figure out what it is that they're going to object to. Because if they object to it in the big meeting publicly, you can't get back from that. But if you share the idea with them one-on-one, you get the no quickly. Just to expect, okay, there is going to be a no here. Of course there's going to be. So if we get to that no quickly, we can then start figuring out what the solution is going to be. Because someone will go, yeah, that's great, but it won't work for us. Like, okay, all right, let's privately find that out on reasons why first.
Yeah. And the reason I laughed is pretty much on my first project in consulting, my boss at the time gave me a slide that I still use today, which simply had the title, The 28 Ways People Say No Without Saying No. Right? And one of them is that, oh yeah, that's great, but it won't work here. All these sort of passive-aggressive, semi-polite ways of going, yes, no. And you hear them all the time in meetings, particularly in certain cultures.
Yeah, so fascinating. Now you've got a framework which I've never seen before. So let's talk about that. So on your social media, you have success equals IQ times EQ times FQ. So maybe you could give that some color and context for us.
Give it some color, and it's building on what we've talked about already, right? The IQ is the great idea, the great strategy. Whatever you want to achieve in life, and first of all, we always start with, you've got to have a goal, right? Either a positive goal, I want to climb Everest, or I want to solve this problem, right? Define it, spend time there. If you don't have it, don't start doing anything, right? And that's surprising how many companies, individuals do not have these goals, do not have this. But once you've got that, it's really clear. The first component you need is, what is the best way to achieve that, right? Let's come up with loads of ideas. It's not that what's the first way that comes into my mind to achieve it. What's the best way, right? You should be generating 100 ideas and picking the best. And that's often what we go. And that's the IQ component. Make sure it is the best idea. Make sure it's stress tested. Make sure concrete, there's proof behind it, that this is going to work. Then the second part, the EQ, that's the emotional intelligence. Get others engaged in it. Get them excited. Get them understanding what you're talking about, right? Because you cannot achieve things. It's very, very hard to achieve things completely on your own, particularly in the business world. So that's the EQ component. That is still not enough. And I was grasping with, when I did that audit, what was the differential between those super successful companies? And it was this third component that I codified as FQ, focus quotient. Companies that are super successful, the individuals who are super successful, have massive amounts of focus around their strategy. They prioritize it. They remove barriers to it. They make sure it is clear and articulated constantly and reminded, right? And it is that component, along with the other two, that makes you super successful. And so all the sort of budding mathematicians out there, and I used to be a maths teacher, that's why the multiplication signs apply. Because I've gone into a lot of arenas, they go, don't worry, we've got really smart people. We've got an overabundance of IQ, so we'll get this strategy through. And I'm like, no, it's multiplied, because if you've got 0 in those other columns, anything times by 0 equals 0. So it doesn't matter if you've got Einstein in the room and he's designed a strategy. If people aren't bought into it, it's going to fail. If you're not focused, it's going to fail, right? So you cannot leave these other two components just by the wayside.
Fascinating. Okay, so let's go into those.
Yeah.
So the first one is intelligence. So let's go, and it's the ability to determine the best solution. And you said what you were saying, one of the strategies the first thing is you've got to be really clear on your goal. That's when we're breaking it down. You'll be super clear what is the goal that you're looking to achieve. Well, actually, let's start there.
Yeah,
do you sometimes do you even find that companies aren't clear, or even individuals just aren't clear on what the actual goal is, what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah. So I find two things. They don't have any goal, or it's wishy-washy. Like, and I often use myself as an example. It's like me waking up on January 1st going, this year I want to be a better person. All right. And you go around really proud of yourself. I've got a goal. I want to be a better person. But someone just comes up to you and goes, what does better mean? Right? How do I know you've become a better person? How can I say to you at the end of the year, yeah, you're better? And they'll be like, well, I'm just better. And it's not helpful, right? Is it better because you speak more languages, because you've lost weight, you got fitter, you're nicer to your parents? Yeah. What does better mean? You've got to unpack it. And so it's where you've actually got to put some definition metrics around it so everyone is clear. The other thing that I see in teams is, and I often do this as a nice thing where they go, don't worry, we've got a goal, we've got a vision. I'll say, all right, without talking to each other, each of you write down on one post-it what you think the goal is. And then we're all going to reveal it exactly at the same moment. Do you know, in a team of 8 senior people, how many cracks there are when they turn their card over? And I'm like, wow, and you guys are the bosses of this company, and you don't even can't all sing from the same hymn sheet. So that's why we've got to spend time here, because every crack from here or every wishy-washy from here is just going to permeate through your business.
That's fascinating. And sometimes is it just the matter of that the goal is just a revenue number, so it's too simplistic and it's not.
It's absolutely fascinating what happens. Right? Let me tell you the story of. Sometimes it is, it's outdated. It's something that they set years ago, but the company's moved on. Sometimes they've been deceptive to themselves. So let's take the latter one. I was working with a small company. They have 4 directors. They have a team of about 40 people. And we were doing a strategy refresh. And I said, in advance of the strategy refresh, can you send me your current strategy, anything you've got written down about it, and your accounts for the last few years and the work you've been doing the last few years? So they sent me this bunch of stuff. And I walked into the room and I said, look, you've got to help me out here. I looked over all the documents you sent me and something is wrong here, right? I looked at what you wrote as your strategy and I looked at what you've been delivering the last 3 years, and there's a mismatch. So either you are really bad at winning the kind of work that you said is vital for this company, or you're lying about what your goal is for this company, your vision. Which one is it? And I said, I don't care which one it is. This is just glaring to me when I read. And there was like 3 minutes of silence, right? And bear in mind that their vision had said something like, we want to provide engineering solutions to make the world a better place. Okay, it's wishy-washy anyway, but all the projects they'd done were just like a mismatch of, aero defense projects, building a bridge here or thing. Yeah, there was nothing to say about sustainability or green. So anyway, I posed this question and they all sat in silence. And then finally, after about 3 minutes, one of them broke and went, can I be honest? I just want to retire by the time I'm 50. That's why I set up this company. Right? And somebody else around the room went, yeah, for me, I don't really have a passion for the environment. I just, really, want to make some money and blah, blah, blah. And slowly it was like this sort of, became accepted that they could all just say what they were honestly, like, yeah. I said, okay, right. Don't write that on your website that I just want to retire by 50, but equally don't write that we are the greenest, most environmental company in the world, because that's a lie, right? It's a lie to future employees. It's a lie to future customers, so you've got to write something that you are comfortable with, that actually you can hang every project you bring in on, right? So it can be stuff like that as well, right? But let's get that real clarity and alignment before we go any further.
It's so interesting because quite often I can think of a business that I was in a number of years ago, and it wasn't just the revenue number, it was the composition, it was the type of revenue that was sought, that people that we needed to treat, which was into long-term contracts. But we also were in a position where we could sell smaller, it's like one-off projects as well. But sometimes you need to sell those one-off projects to get into the longer-term contracts. So, but one of the challenges was that it wasn't easy to explain to a customer why they should be into that long-term relationship, because it just wasn't something you just go and buy off the shelf. So then we were in conversations constantly around, well, what is it? What is it that we're delivering? How should we communicate what it is? And how are we going to talk about the tangible savings and all these sorts of things? And I found like the company just went round and round and round and round in circles. 5 years later, we didn't meet those goals that the private equity company had set out for us. And it felt like we were just sort of bouncing around. No one was really, we never quite got there. And I often think about that and I just think it's because no one was ever really clear on what it is. And interestingly, we had a consultant who became a non-executive director, and he came in and did something very similar, which was, tell me the mission of the company. He said that to lots of people. No one could communicate it. No one knew. No one knew what the mission of the company was.
Yeah. Do you know, this is so vital. I referenced him earlier in a joke, Albert Einstein, but there's a great quote from Albert Einstein that I use regularly when it's evident that there is this mismatch or people don't really know or it's not clear. You know, he once said, if I only had an hour to work on a problem and my life depended on it, I would allocate at least 55 minutes of that hour to defining the problem, because then it's easy. He said, but too many people spend 55 minutes doing stuff. And that is what I say to companies. I said, no, if we need to spend a whole week here, let's spend a whole week here. Because this is paramount for your business to understand what you want to achieve. Don't just start going out selling stuff, building stuff, because that's all meaningless if you don't know what it's adding up to.
Fascinating. It's so hard. It's so interesting. Like because so often when you set up a business or you're going on a journey, you kind of just expect that, what do we do? What are we here for? What are we trying to achieve? It's also that in your personal life as well. Yeah. What are we all trying to achieve as a collective, or equally, what am I trying to get out of this moment, this experience? It's so interesting because I often think about, like, generally everyone sets their new New Year's resolutions.
Yeah.
And it's very rare that someone actually holds someone to account to those resolutions and say, are you sure they're your goals? And they question them. It's very rare that actually happens. But I've got a coach, and recently I kind of said, these are the goals and everything else. And he's challenged me. He said, well, why? Yeah. Why do they matter? What is this? What are we trying to achieve here? And I just thought it's so reflective of just goals in general. Like, how do you know your goals are the right goals? Or even a business goal, how do you know it's the right one?
Yeah, but, here's the thing, and you're absolutely right about the New Year's resolution. When you have a goal and you really are passionate, this is where the purpose that all, these speakers talk about, the Simon Sinek's, the Tony Robbins. You leap out of bed when you have something that you actually understand why you're doing it. Why am I getting up today? Why am I going to work? Oh, for this reason, right? And it's okay for the reason to pay the mortgage, right? But define that, own it. It will be so much clearer. Then you can start looking at things like, is this going to help me pay my mortgage? No. So why am I doing it? Right? And it's so funny when you talk about goals. This is the first year. So I don't do resolutions. I set myself goals and challenges. And this is the first year of my life I just posted them publicly on social media. I went, hello world, these are my 9 goals for this year. And the most fascinating things happened. A whole bunch of people came out and challenged me. Oh, why are you doing those? Oh, those seem too ambitious. Those seem too many, right? Are you sure you should be focusing on those? I'm like, okay, that's good, right? You're challenging me. I may disagree, but at least it's really getting me to think and fight about it. And then a whole bunch of people said, great, thanks for sharing those. I'm now going to hold you accountable if you want me to. I will check in every week, see how you're doing. Because you've gone public, I'm happy to help you. And then there was a third group of people, even better. I'll help you. And this is where the EQ part comes in. Yeah, one of my goals was around running. This guy who I only vaguely know goes, I'll go running with you once a week. Right? I'm faster than you. I can help you. Right? I was one of my goals was buy a flat. I had 4 people approach me. Come and have a look at my flat. It's in the area you said you want to buy. Right? So by having clear goals and sharing them, amazing things happen. And imagine, A, if I had no goals, none of that would happen. B, if I'd never made them public, they would be a lot harder to achieve. But I know a lot of people are scared about A, defining, and B, sharing.
Yeah. So do you feel like that's an important part of goal setting, which is my coach calls it declaring, but do you feel like it should be public, visible, out there in the world? So therefore, in your situation, people can actually help you. They can offer you advice, guidance, be accountable. Do you feel like goals should be very public in that case?
Yeah. And your degree of publicness is up to you, right? I'm not saying you have to post them on social media, but tell at least one other person, right? Tell somebody that you admire, respect, love. And it will be as much for your benefit as them.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that was the first piece, which was about defining your goal.
Defining the goal, yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the intelligence piece. So the ability to determine the best solution. Now, one of the things you were talking about there was coming up with lots and lots and lots of ideas.
Yeah. This is one of my favorite parts of the strategy process. Right? If I've got a clear goal, let's say my goal is I want to climb Everest. Right? Now, most people will just come up with an idea or two. All right, well, to reach the top of Everest, let's just climb up the North Face, or I'm not sure if it's the North Face or the South Face. Right? And you'd be like, okay, now there's 100 different ways we could climb Everest. Right? We could, there's 100 different ways we can get to the top of Everest. Right? We could just get a helicopter up there. Right? You've reached your goal. Oh no, your goal is to climb Everest. Okay. Well, you could climb the north side, the east side, the west side. Yeah. You could climb with a Sherpa or without a Sherpa. You could climb as part of a team, or you could climb as using free climbing or ice pick climbing. Right. You can climb carrying a range of supplies. But what I'm trying to get at is there's lots of different sort of options. And many people do not unpack all the options, because that's where great ideas come from, when you start to unpack. And even if they're not great ideas, they might trigger other great ideas. And so what I always say is try and come up with 100 ideas on any topic, right? Using the power of a group. That way, and then pick the best ideas. Now, an idea is just an idea. It's a hypothesis. Even if someone comes to you and says, I know the secrets to grow your business, all they're really saying is, this worked for me, but my company has these variables. Yours have slightly different variables. So all this could be is a suggestion or a hypothesis, right? It's not a cast iron guarantee that this will grow your business, right? There's a newsflash for you. Everyone who says online, they have a way of, no, they have a hypothesis of how you can grow your business. Now, your job is to take all these hypotheses and say, I think these 10 hypotheses are the best ones. I'm going to quickly test them. I'm going to test them on my business, my life. If they prove successful, I'm then going to roll them out. If they don't prove successful, I move on to the next 10 hypotheses. That's why I need 100 hypotheses, right? Because at some point, one of these hypotheses will stop working. And instead of starting again with a blank piece of paper, I've already pre-thought out these 100 ideas. Right. And that's a crucial element that is missing in a lot of businesses. They just take one or two ideas, which are usually the stuff they've always done, and they'll just say something like, well, we'll do more of it. We'll do it harder. Right. Or we'll get AI to do it. Right. Whereas, what we try and encourage them is come up with more ideas, even if they are ridiculous, wacky. Now, how do you get more ideas? A, we can help you be more creative, but B, get different thinkers in the room. Right. It never fails to surprise me how, if you give the same set of information to different groups of people, they come up with different ideas and conclusions. That's great. Those are your 100 ideas, right? It's also a way of getting them involved. So, yeah.
So would you be doing that? You'd be sat in a group, and just talking everything through over a few hours? Like, how would you construct that session? And also, how then do you even get into picking which is the best?
Okay, well, get them out first, right? Do not judge them as they come out. That's what I tell people. So we use a lot of techniques. So, we move teams away from brainstorming, i.e. shouting out ideas, to more brainstorming, which is, again, scientifically proven to generate more ideas, more engagement, which is think alone, then share, right? And then do several rounds of this, because ideas trigger ideas. Right? And it helps by priming people by doing a creative exercise up front. Right? All these little triggers will get more juice going, and have different thinkers in the room, and make sure everyone feels comfortable. So the person facilitating that session has to use high energy, lots of warmth, lots of engagement and inclusivity. Because as soon as somebody feels like their idea is being attacked, they start to clam up. Right? So the worst thing in the world a leader facilitator can do when somebody shouts out an idea is either they say, or allow someone in the room to go, that's a terrible idea. No, you go, even if you think it's a terrible idea, you welcome and go, brilliant. That is a great addition to our ideas board. Oh my God, we hadn't thought of that one. Right? Yes, we should make all teapots out of chocolate. Right? But if you were to greet that in the idea phase, by shooting it down or finding a flaw in it, you are sending a signal to everyone in the room. Actually, we are judging your ideas. Not all ideas are welcome. So in that ideation phase, it's about the environment, it's about the process. And I guarantee you, if you run it right, you can easily get 100 ideas out of a group. Okay.
You also mentioned there prepping. So prepping, creating like a creative environment. So it sounds like there's also another piece here, which is around psychological safety, bringing that, which we'll get to. But you mentioned prepping. So what are you doing there to kind of create an environment where people can share their best ideas?
Yeah. So some of it might be where you do it, right? It's that you want to dislocate their thinking from their regular day job. So don't have it in the same office that they have all their meetings, or right. So take them off site, take them somewhere, do it while walking, do it in a, even if you are doing the same thing, decorate the room a little bit different, move the chairs, have people who don't normally sit next to each other, so that it looks and feels different. I often start even board meetings with a stupid question, just to get people out of their day job. I'll put something up on the wall, like, on a scale of mammals, how are you feeling right now? And I'll put up this list of pictures of mammals, from the bumblebee bat, the world's smallest mammal, to the blue whale, the world's biggest mammal. There's an elephant, and it's a meaningless scale. All right. Of course, there's no scale of mammals that is linked to feelings and emotions. But the whole point is to get people to go, hang on a minute, what? Oh, this is different, right? I've got to think completely laterally, because that's setting the tone for how we're going to spend the next 90 minutes together.
It's brilliant. I love that. It's interesting because yesterday I was in London, and one of the reasons why I love going to London, I normally go to London once a week or so for work, and I always get there really early. And the reason for that is that I can sit in my favorite coffee shop with my journal, and I know that I have a different mind on me. I think differently. And when I journal or I think about something, it's completely different to if I'm at home or if I'm in my studio or just somewhere which is local. And it's so interesting because, and I only discovered this when I went on a flight to Ireland, I think, for a meeting, and I had a few hours to kill before the meeting, and I was just stayed in the airport, and I'd noticed, I was like, my brain and my ideas, they're totally, I'm in this completely different environment where it's big and it's expansive and there's lots of energy. I was thinking differently, and been able to almost take that and go, right, I know if you want to really think about the future or think about a particular problem, change the environment. I think that's one of the biggest things, because it's, again, if you're stuck in the same environment day after day after day, it's very difficult for your mind to actually think about solutions or think in a different way. So I think changing the environment is probably one of the best pieces of advice I could, possibly best advice for more creative thinking.
Yeah, and there's so much science that will show you what stimulates little bits of additional creativity. Changing location, changing your mind and mood set, right? Simply the act of telling yourself a joke or making yourself smile will produce more creativity. Similar, doing a little bit of exercise will stimulate a bit more creativity, even if you didn't enjoy the exercise. All right, so I've got a friend who in between every call does 10 press-ups. It just means he pops up in the next call slightly more positive, got some new ideas, and I often get teams, to start a meeting, do a bit of kung fu together. All right. And they'll look at me and go, why? I'm like, you will all be more creative and, work better because of this, even if you're not enjoying it right now. Okay. Always sets the tone.
Excellent. And then, so the piece we're going to come on to here is psychological safety. So being able to share your idea without recourse. So essentially, before someone's going to shout you down and say, that's a terrible idea, because what you're clearly saying here is that all ideas are valuable, because one idea can lead on to another idea. Someone say, well, that might not quite work, but this might. But even in that context, you want all of the ideas. You're kind of trying to create a level of psychological safety. Maybe you can talk to that for a second.
Yeah. So I often talk about psychological safety as the equivalent of your first day at school. Okay. And, we've all been there. It's a really scary day, right? You walk into the playground, you're looking around, who am I going to hang out with? And you find one other kid maybe, or a group of kids, and you go up to them and say, can I hang out with you? And they go, yeah, just stand there. right? Or it's not even said, it's just implicit, you just sidle over. And so that's the first level of psychological safety. I found someone that I can just hang around. Right? And it goes all the way to the other end of the scale. So that there's 4 levels of psychological safety. I'm comfortable just hanging around with you. I'm comfortable then the next level, just listening to you and learning from you. I'm then comfortable sharing my opinions with you. That's level 3, right? But level 4 is the best, where I'm comfortable making a fool in front of you, right? Saying something that I'm not sure is right, because I'm so comfortable that even if it's wrong, you'll all support me, or it's all okay. Now that's a big leap, right? From day one at big school where you're really scared to saying, no, I think your view's rubbish. This is the best football team in the world or whatever, right? That's a really scary. So that's where you want to create as a leader, that level 4 for ideas, for teaming, for stuff. And that's a lot of the work that I do, is getting teams there quicker.
Excellent. So when does this go into EQ, which is the emotional piece? And we're thinking about the ability to bring others with you. So you have this great idea, you're going on this direction. How do you bring people along for the ride?
So we're already touching upon it with psychological safety, but the other big component is think about what they are going through when you tell it. Think about both in terms of how do they like to be told stuff, right? I often talk about the platinum rule being better than the golden rule when I work with leaders or anyone. Right? Do you know the golden rule? You might have been told as a child the golden rule was treat others how you
want to be treated.
How you want to be treated, right? So you're often told that as a kid. It's a great rule. Turns out there's an even better rule, which is treat others how they want to be treated. Right? Game changer. Right? So if somebody likes A, give them A. Right? Don't give them B just because you like B. Right? And the only way you can know is by talking to them, getting to know them. And it's particularly pertinent when it comes to communication. We all have a preferred communication style in a situation. Some people like a lot of facts. Some people like a story. Some people like just being told what to do. Right? Some people being asked their opinion. Learn what your team or the people around you like, and don't do what you like. Give them what they like. Even literally, it's the same piece of information, but how are you going to convey it to them? And by just flexing and flipping to their style, they are so many times more likely to absorb it and buy into it. Right? As well as thinking, oh, right, I'm about to tell John about this new initiative. John's got 4 kids and he's probably worried about, about having to work harder. Me saying with all excitement, there's a new initiative. John's first reaction will be like, oh my God, this is going to be more work. Right? Put yourself into what might they feel when they hear this news or this new thing, right? And try and therefore accommodate that. Anticipate it in it. So that's where we try and work with teams around the EQ aspect.
Just reflecting on that for a moment. It's so right, isn't it? Where to bring other people with you, you need to understand who's there, who's in the room. It's interesting because I lead a team, and when I communicate something, I know that I could share something which is reasonably simple and basic, like there's a new person joining the team, and that can have everyone can react differently to that very small piece of information. Like someone will go, oh, great, John's joining. Or someone else is going to go, well, that's a threat to me because they're going to do a role similar to me. Or someone else is going to think, well, what are we doing wrong? It's so interesting, isn't it, that in the business context, a piece of information can really impact somebody's day. So it's the way that it's communicated, aligned with how that person wants to receive the information. And you've really got to get to know your team and the people around you at quite a deep level, which does require a level of effort. If you just broadcast it out, Slack message, this is the change, or this is the thing.
Yeah.
We're now reporting in this way. It's like, it creates distance, doesn't it? If there isn't that kind of.
It does. And actually, a lot of our work is in the bucket is with very technical people who you can see their preference is dealing with a problem or an object or so it might be an engineer who loves building stuff because the stuff doesn't talk back to them, right? They will put all their efforts into building and making it a better product. but then having to go and tell someone about that product or handle criticism about that product, they find really difficult. And that's often why we come in and we coach them or teach them how to communicate, how to, it's not an argument. They're giving you ideas and stuff. Or it might be a lawyer who's really good at the law and spends all their time learning, the statutes in the law and being very good, rather than spending that same time debating with people about the law. All right. Because the emotional bit is hard. I mean, both those buckets are hard work, but the emotional one, it involves getting to know people. It involves sort of conceding your opinion sometimes. It involves shutting up a lot of the time. It involves a lot of things that people find difficult. And so it's much easier to retreat to your safe place, which is just deal with intellectual challenges because they don't talk back to them. And I see a lot more of this nowadays with AI, ironically. A lot of people hide behind AI to do all the thinking, but you still have to communicate the message to somebody else afterwards. And they find that bit really difficult. Right? And so it doesn't matter how good the AI, and until the AI communicates the message, but then, where are you involved? But I see that more and more as we work with people.
Yeah. Is there a strategy around communication for what lands in the best way? So if there is a change coming, what's your guidance?
So it is know your people, right? They've done some fascinating research around, which I totally found fascinating. They took a bunch of individuals and they bombarded them simultaneously with messaging, right? So at exactly the same point in time, they sent them a phone call, a text message, an email, an Instagram message, a WhatsApp, all these things to see what order they would respond to them. Okay, to see and here's what they discovered. It really depends on your age and culture, right? Older people, this is generalizations, will tend to always prioritize the phone because when they were growing up, if the phone was ringing, it was usually bad news. But you always answered the phone. You made that your priority, right? And then you got to an age group who always did their emails as the main thing because that was their main communication channel. And you go all the way down to the younger generations now who their first place they will go is a Snapchat message or an Instagram message, right? And so the answer is, if you're communicating, think about which communication method the person you're sending to likes, right? So then don't get frustrated that they didn't answer the phone if they're a young person, right? Or if they're an old person, they completely missed the Slack message because that's not how their brain is wired. That's not what's the prioritization for them. If you were a smart leader, you would give each of them the communication method they'd like, and then go to the next level. How should I then write that message so that they will most likely? And then level 3, I should then check in with them to see what they actually received. Because broadcast is easy, sending out the message, but then validating what did they hear, that's the messy bit. Because like you said, did they hear that John's joining the team? Oh, great. Or did they hear John's joining the team? Oh, shit. And it's very valuable for you as a leader to understand that sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Or disaster. I mean, literally disaster. I mean, because if John's joining the team and now he's impacting my role, I'm off interviewing and I've completely taken it out of context because actually John was coming in to do something different. But hang on, his LinkedIn looks like he's got a job role that's very similar to mine. It's amazing the impact of leadership in the way of communication. Okay. So is there anything else before we move on to the focus piece? Anything else on emotional that we should be considering?
As we touched upon before, emotions start with you, right? So before you master how to flex your and accommodate other people's emotions, are you accommodating your own? Are you in touch with your own emotions? I discovered in my first year of business that my emotions were the single biggest factor on whether the business would be successful. In fact, emotions are the single biggest factor in most things. I recently, I'm happy to talk about it. I recently had the pleasure of doing a speed awareness course, Simon. Yes, I may have got caught speeding. And there was this lovely ex-copper who ran the course. And he opened up, there was 20 of us in the room. He opened up with a simple question. He said, what is the number one cause of speeding and accidents in the UK? And people went, oh, it must be drinking, or it must be texting while driving. He was like, no, no, no. He said, it is emotions. If you get in a car angry, you are 5 times more likely to speed and or have an accident. If you get in a car sad, you are 5 times more likely to speed or have an accident. If you get into a car, in surprise, mate, you are 5 times more likely. He said, the weird thing is, we ask you to do breathalyzers to check you're not over the limit. We don't ask you how you're feeling before you can fire the ignition on your car. Right? But it's the same. If you write an email angry, it's not going to be a great email. If you do anything. So we should all be checking with our emotions first before we do anything. Because as I discovered in my first year, if I was in a bad mood, the next meeting went badly. I was therefore in a worse mood. The subsequent meeting went badly, and so on and so on. And it meant in the early days, we won no work on weeks where I was feeling below par. And that is not good for a small business. And so the sooner I clocked that and I worked out how to get myself back into a happy place, it was night and day for the business.
Fascinating, isn't it?
Aren't we weird creatures?
We are. As it's the weird creatures where we're individuals having to think about our emotions, and then we're putting into a business context where, as you said, they tell us to be without emotion, and because, you just need to be cool and calm and, professional, when actually it's, the best people I've worked with are characters, and they bring the thing that we're doing to life, and it gives it meaning and purpose. If I think about one of the best leaders I ever worked with, I loved going to work just to be around him. He's so positive and had this energy and his laugh, but also had the deep technical knowledge of how to do the job. And it was infectious. Like, he would sit in the office and people, I'd sat myself next to him because I was like, I just want to learn off this guy. I want to have the energy from him.
Yeah.
And it was just an infectious place, a beautiful place, brilliant place to work at the time. Wish I could have worked with him for longer, but it was like, that's, he just brought this energy, and I just thought this is, the top end of what business looks like, I think.
I mean, are you still in touch with him?
Yeah. Still in touch. He moved to Dubai. He now leads the whole Dubai. No, it's more than that. I think he's just been promoted. So he now looks after all of MENA for a company called Cooper. So he's in the software industry. Yeah, he's an exceptional leader. I nearly moved to Dubai actually to go and work with him for that.
Well, I mean, there's a really important point there. I often say to people, actually, people like that are actually few and far between. I remember when I was a junior and I joined my first company, I'd been a school teacher up until that point. So I spent 6 years as a school teacher, and I was looking forward to being in the corporate world because I read the FT every day, and I was looking forward to meeting all these captains of industry, these inspirational leaders. And it turns out that they're very rare. Right? They're not on every team, not around every corner. And I was really shocked. But what I then learned is, so if you do find one, stay in touch with them. Do not let them out of your life, because you learn, they take you with them. They are the source of all that are going to be good in your future. So start collecting them like Pokemon cards, and your life will be richer.
Yeah. It's very rare. If I look back at my 20 years in sales, it's only a very small handful of people, and he was definitely at the top end of that. There's a very small, handful of people you really look and go, wow, they were really outstanding. So yeah, I completely agree. Okay, so we're moving to the business end of this, which is focus. And I was listening to a great podcast with Robert Greene the other day, Robert Greene and Stephen Bartlett, and Robert Greene was talking about the importance of focus of obtaining a goal. So if you're so one is obviously what we talked about today is about defining the goal and being really clear around what it is. And then there was a point in that podcast conversation, which was around the more focused you are on that particular goal, the more deep skills you'll learn, enjoy, and the more likely that you are to accelerate the goal. So what's the importance of focus when you're trying to achieve something?
As you touched on, right? Having clarity is massive. Reminding yourself why you're doing stuff. Actually, that's why you see a lot of people physically put on the wall what their goals are, put them at the top of every meeting agenda, so it flows through and you can link everything back. But then it is that ruthless prioritization. Right? Is this going to get me one step closer to my goal? If not, why am I doing it? Right? Some of the most amazing people I met have been solo focused or mono focused, as you call it. I had the pleasure of meeting this lady called Adriana Barrington, who has the world record for the youngest person to climb all 14 highest mountains in the world. She did it at the age of 23. Right? And she did it. Her first mountain she climbed was when she was 15 with her dad, who was an explorer. And when she came down from that mountain, she said, I'm going to go for that record. This is what is me. This is what I want to achieve. And that then shaped the decisions in her life. She decided to just drop out of school after her A-levels, right? Not continue further education so she could become a full-time explorer. She decided to change her diet based on it. She decided to never go out and never drink as a result, because she was so focused on this goal that would take 8 years of her life. She built her whole life around it. That is monofocus for you, right? It's what we see in top athletes. Cristiano Ronaldo, he has built his whole life around just playing football. All right. Now, obviously, average Joe and Jane public, we're not going to do that. We're not going to build it around one single thing. But the more things you can remove, the better you will be. That's what true focus is about.
And then when you're putting that into a business context, because that was talking about some individuals there where they've been hyper focused on a thing. And by the way, so I didn't get the lady's name, but I'd love to chat to her on the podcast if you know her. So when it's a business objective, and I think that's what Steve Jobs was talking about on this particular podcast, and he was talking to one of his executives and said, what have you been turning down recently? Because this is the goal. It's keeping everything and everyone focused on one particular thing. Yeah. And how challenging can that be when you're leading an entire organization, which is sizable?
Super challenging. And I'm yet to meet a company that does that ruthless, right? But here's what I do, and here's what I see regularly. I go into a company, talk to the leadership, and I say, okay, just how many strategic initiatives are you doing? And if you don't know, go and find out, right? And they'll come back and they'll say, oh, we're doing 150 for us. We're doing 200. I'm like, whoa, right? I don't care how big you are. It doesn't matter if you're Apple. 200 strategic initiatives. Just imagine you tried that in your own personal life, doing 200 things that you said were important and different, right? Learn a language, move house, get a new job, start a new relationship. You just not have enough bandwidth, right? When it boils down to, people are like, well, which one should I prioritize? Which one? So I say to them, you need to rationalize that. Okay. Now I understand they'll always tell me the logical reasons of why they've got 200 projects. Well, we started this IT implementation because our systems were old. Oh, we started an overhaul of the HR team because we discovered our policies were outdated. I get all that. There will always be logical reasons why you need to do this. But what we're talking about from prioritization, which are the most important for now? Right? You can resurrect those other ones, but which ones should you get over the line because they are the most vital for your company? Right? And that's where I'm going to help you. And I say, look, I understand it's difficult to get to that. Right? So I often use a technique, which is bringing a bit of play and fun into it, which is we'll take all 200 projects, we will take their data, their business cases, and I will turn those into Pokemon cards. Okay? Now, if you've never played Pokemon cards, they're like the old top trumps. You have a card, it has all these statistics. Right? In the world of Pokemon, it's height and strength and weight and all these things. In the world of business, it's cost. How much profit does it anticipate? How many people does it get involved? We then sit in the boardroom and play Pokemon for a couple of hours. The reason being is it's fun. It also brings into light which projects are better than others, because some cards just keep losing. And somebody will get frustrated if it's in their hand. They're like, well, that's not fair. I got the terrible cards. I'm like, that's a terrible project. The way to make your hand better is just get rid of it. And so through playing 2 hours, they will voluntarily give up 100 projects because it doesn't feel like I'm giving up a project. I'm just giving away a Pokemon card. But suddenly you have halved, or doubled their prioritization. And often what we do is we get them down to 50 projects, or ideally 30 projects, 20 projects. And it is like night and day then, because that flows throughout the company. These are our flagship projects. Let's get these over the line. Then we can resurrect the other ones, or we can kill them off slowly, or quietly. So that's the single biggest thing that we do with companies around focus.
Is there anything else on the focus points that we haven't kind of discussed there? I feel like there are a lot of gotchas within that moment.
There's a lot of look. A lot of the rest of focus is about anticipation, right? We do a lot of war gaming, pre-mortems to take an idea and say what's going to go wrong with this in advance, and if we can see that there might be, let's just remove that barrier in advance. Don't wait for it to happen, right? Because the last thing you want to do is hit a barrier and it slow down your progress. So anticipate this is going to be a problem. Make a set of decisions around it in advance so that when you get there, it gets removed. Right? Or you pre-strengthen to make sure it never happens. So there's a lot about that. It's about anticipating risks, dealing with them in advance. That's another big aspect, folks. And that's before we get to the micro aspects. Everyone wants to know, how do I stop using my phone? How do I stop getting distracted by all these things? Yes, remove unnecessary meetings. Make phones, not allowed in meetings. There's a whole set of micro actions that can make individuals focus. But the biggest thing you can do is at a corporate level.
It's been a great conversation today. I've really loved every second of our discussion. It's been, I've never heard someone align strategy and emotional intelligence together, and I think you've articulated it beautifully.
Thank you very much. Yeah, as I said, this is just how I go about life. So I love talking about it and I love helping others with it.
So if someone wants to know more about you, get in contact, worked with your business, your consulting firm, what would be the best way of doing so?
I think the two best ways is, so the company is called Shigeto. You can see, those who are watching, there's a pillow behind me with the company name and logo on it. Shigeto is the Japanese word for a sharpening stone. We say we are human sharpening stones. We will sharpen any human to get more out of their IQ, EQ, and FQ. So come and find us at www.shigeto.com, and you can take an assessment to see your own sharpness. But also you can talk to us, or come and talk to me directly on LinkedIn. There's only one Faris Aranki. I'm there every day and I answer every message I get, and I share some tips every day. So love to hear from all the listeners and viewers.
Well, thanks so much for today's conversation. It's been really truly excellent.
Thank you very much, Simon.